Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a while since I've done a video, and I feel like I'm actually more comfortable with getting into doing this again and probably hopefully do a better job of actually doing these recordings. My name is Dr. Kristine Coons. I'm a physician, hospitalist by practice, but I also research and study intersex, transgender, gender identity, kind of a plethora of scopes into what makes up human sex, how it interacts with our brains, and everywhere in between. So, as a brief introduction to all of this, this is kind of how I approach or the history of where I came from with all this. Back a few years ago, I transitioned and I wanted to learn more about myself in terms of human anatomy, development, physiology, and everywhere in between. Yeah, I went to medical school and got all the classes and training, but I wanted to get more into detail. And the reason behind that is because when I interacted with other people in discussions, there was a lot of people that started off with these discussions of there's only male, there's only female. I said, well, that's sure, I can work with that notion. But the counter arguments always said, well, what about intersex? And I got really frustrated because we usually stopped the conversations there, or people just let it go and disappeared and really didn't evolve these discussions into more depth. It was kind of one of those where the answer was usually along the lines of, oh, but that's rare. We can kind of brush that off and set it aside because it's insignificant. And as a consequence of that, we actually ended up hurting a lot of people because of those behaviors and how we acted towards them. What I wanted to do was kind of sift through all these layers and say, what can I get to at the base of all this to help me understand myself, help us understand each other better, and how can we improve things moving forward? So I started out with just diving into the medical literature, PubMed, journal articles, looking into more in-depth research about how we develop as humans, going into embryology and development. Ended up getting a few textbooks in the midst of all that. Um, the first one that I ended up picking up is this one, Langman's Medical Embryology. And to be honest, it helps with a little bit of the basics, but in terms of the in-depthness, it's not as good as this one that I just picked up. This is Bruce Carlson, Human Embryology and Developmental Biology. And this one is a fantastic book. I'm very much appreciating how this one is approached. But I also wanted to get a foundation of where other people were coming from with their arguments of, talking about sex determination, sex differentiation, and how that has evolved and progressed. So this has been a learning experience about history, anatomy, physiology, psychology, anthropology, just kind of all these fields together to establish kind of this premise of who are we as humans, and how do we work with this concept of male versus female, man versus woman, and then all the variations and diversity that we see between all this. And I wanted to start because we have this notion of what's going on with gender identity. I needed to start with the fundamentals of everything from conception all the way to birth to our human development through adolescence into adulthood, and how this functions as a whole unit. How do we work with each individual system, but also as a whole? And that's something as an osteopathic physician that I was taught in medical school to focus in on. Don't just take a person by their individual presentation, if you will, whether it be something as simple as pneumonia or a stroke, but to actually look at the whole patient and say, what does this individual really need to help them move forward and progress? So as a consequence of that, I've been working as a bridge to help understanding how do we take information and scientific knowledge that we knew about in the 1900s, early 1900s, and translate that over into modern contexts. When we look at Gregor Mendel, if you will, in the late 1800s, and his rediscovery of his research into peas and the subsequent development of the Punnett square, and how we evolved and discovered chromosomes. Gregor Mendel is considered the father of genetics, but genomics and genetics have actually a longer history even before that. If we think about how farmers raise cattle or farm animals, it's always been the strongest. You mate the ones that are the strongest and the best with the best characteristics. We actually kind of knew all this stuff even before Gregor Mendel sat down with his peas and figured out this inheritance pattern that we associate with Mendelian genetics. Well, that led into a later discovery in 1906 about sex chromosomes. Discovery of chromosomes in of themselves is not that old, or it's older than we think, and it's not that old at the same time. The sex chromosomes were discovered by several different people. I usually use Nettie Stevens as the one that I like to focus in on, just because she's a woman. And it's really nice to be able to actually show that in history, there have been a lot of women that have done a lot of scientific research, and it's really neat to see that. And she was studying maggots, actually flies, and she was looking at their chromosomes under a microscope and noticed that one maggot compared to a different maggot had, even though they had the same number of chromosomes, one of them looked different than the other one. And that led to the subsequent discovery of chromosomes, or sex chromosomes in of themselves. We as a society and culture got really excited about chromosomes, really excited. And we actually took this scientific discovery, translated it over into our social structure and hierarchy. And we show that, hey, the structure that we have right now where males and females are unique and separate, that's confirmed by this scientific discovery. Well, we ran into issues with that approach as we evolved over time, because we started discovering other things that were happening that we didn't quite fully understand and explain. This is where we run into the comments about intersex people, and we say, well, what about Klinefelters? What about Turner syndrome? What about triple X, or all these other aneuploidies? And aneuploidy just means a different number of chromosomes compared to what we expect with humans. And as we made these individual discoveries, we went deeper and deeper into genetics and genomics to analyze how this was actually functioning inside the human body. We discovered that it was not just the chromosomes. The chromosomes in themselves really don't do anything. I usually describe chromosomes as a USB drive. In of itself, the USB drive does not do anything until you actually have it plugged into a computer, and then you have to actually process the information that's on that USB drive. So all we're doing with gametes coming together, the sperm and the egg, is we're just presenting these USB drives, connecting them together. And all of a sudden, we now have to wait and see how they develop over time. So it's not just the genetics that we have to be concerned about, it's how it's processed over time. I think that's one of the things we forget about significantly in our discussions and discourse in society today. We focus on this point in time and we say conception, this is when all this is firm, set in stone, when in reality, we still have embryology, gestation to make our way through. We have adolescence to make our way through and adulthood to make our way through. So life is all about this dynamic function of how we move through time. It's all these inputs and outputs of interaction between different aspects of the human body. So this becomes very complicated very quickly. So what I'm going to do with these videos is try to see if I can't break that down into more simple components and discuss why it is the way it is. Take it into a deeper notion of deeper aspects of the science. I'm going to pull from several different textbooks. I'm going to pull from the medical literature and just present and discuss. As part of this, just to let people know, I do actually go around. I teach at medical schools. I teach medical students. And I work with several different organizations to help people understand themselves better in terms of their variations that we see. And I want to be very careful with how I phrase the medical aspect of this. A week or so ago, I was a part of a conference that got together a whole bunch of intersex individuals. And I was actually really grateful just to kind of sit back and kind of listen. I answered a few questions here and there, but it was really nice to be able to actually just hear people and have them say they get it. A group of people that actually understand themselves, and a group and collection of these individuals getting together and just appreciating the fact that they are unique in different ways compared to the general population, or how we perceive that. The challenge with that is we're forgetting them. We're forgetting these people who are unique and different. We're forgetting that gender identity is a variation and function of our brain development. And I want to be able to represent that with these videos. So that's kind of my brief introduction. I'm going to be pulling from my previous videos. I'm going to evolve those as time goes on. I am learning how to do this. I'm not a great video creator, but at the same time, I feel that this information needs to be out there and get to the people that need to be, it needs to get in the hands of people, especially as we learn and grow in this society and culture. I hope what this does is that it helps calm down some of the fears that people have about transgender individuals, gender diverse individuals, intersex individuals, people who have variations, because we're not mistakes. We never have been. We're part of this world, we're part of these communities, and we have every right to exist in them. So thank you for your time. I'm going to get started, and hopefully I can do this in a reasonable manner.